It was 10:18 on a Thursday morning, the kind of hour where inboxes are still clean and coffee doesn't taste burnt yet. I was in the middle of signing off on Q3 contracts when the email came in. Subject line, Mason, please review ASAP. No body text, just a single attachment, a PDF resume. My dad never used punctuation in his messages, but I could feel the weight of that period at the end of ASAP, like a warning more than a request. I didn't open it. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, stared out at the rain-dotted glass wall of my office, and tapped the back of my pen against my teeth. That's when I knew. This was going to be a line in the sand. Not a suggestion, not a discussion, a test, and I was already failing it. My dad, Richard Galen, built his contracting company from the ground up in the 80s. Drywall, roofing, high-end remodels. Back then, it was just him, a truck, and a clipboard. Over the years, he grew it into a local empire. Galen Construction, red-lettered trucks parked outside every suburban strip mall, and church renovation in 3 counties. By the time I was 13, I knew how to price out a bathroom job blindfolded. I started sweeping floors and hauling sheetrock in high school, then got my civil engineering degree, like he never had time to do. In his eyes, that was the plan. I'd take the company next level. Corporate clients, design-build contracts. That's what I did. But we always clashed on people. He ran on loyalty. Old-timers, family, guys who used to sleep in their trucks. I ran on performance, credentials, results. When I took over as CEO 2 years ago, phased succession, still joint ownership, we made a deal. I'd keep the field team stable, but for new hires in project management, HR, and finance. That was my turf. Then came the email. Mason is my sister Laura's oldest, 25, maybe 26. A good kid generally, but let's be real, he had no experience in construction, no business degree, just a patchy resume, a few temp jobs, and a vague interest in logistics. I knew this because he'd texted me about a job the week before. I told him, politely, we weren't hiring. Dad clearly didn't like that answer. I heard the rumblings even before I got the follow-up call. They think you're getting too fancy with the hiring. Your father says you're shutting out the family. People are saying you act like you're better than your roots. At 10:41 a.m., my phone buzzed. You get the email? He said. Yeah, I got it. Pause. And I'm not bringing him on, Dad. You even look at it? No? Another pause, this one longer. You know, you didn't used to be this arrogant. When you worked out of that trailer with me, you respected people. Now you think a piece of paper matters more than blood. It's not about blood. It's about fit. We've got liability exposure, tight margins. Mason's not ready. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. That's how I knew he meant it. All right, then we're done. Don't call me when it all turns to shit. 2 weeks later, he pulled out. Yanked the shared accounts, froze the discretionary fund we used for project overages, told the accountants to draw down his end of the partnership unless I came to my senses. I didn't. We hemorrhaged cash for the next 3 months. Our big school build stalled. Subcontractors started demanding payment up front. I had to cut bonuses. We lost 2 senior estimators who saw the writing on the wall. Still, I didn't fold. I thought he'd blink first. That he'd realize I was protecting the company's future, not disrespecting its past. But pride is a funny thing. It doesn't bend. It breaks. The last time I saw him in person was at a supplier conference in June. He didn't even look at me, just walked past in a leather jacket, flanked by his cronies. Guys who looked like they were still living in 1994. A week later, I got wind that Galen Construction, the original branch he still owned solo, was in trouble. Lawsuits over unpaid invoices, a botched community centre reno, 2 projects abandoned mid-frame because the site foreman walked. Then came the kicker. A 30-year-old roofing supplier filed for bankruptcy and claimed Galen hadn't paid in 6 months. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't even gloat. But a small part of me, the part that still held a grudge from the time he made me fire my best friend for denting a truck, felt something close to grim satisfaction. Until my sister called. "You need to talk to Dad," she said. Her voice was tight, like she'd been crying or shouting or both. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "Well, it's not about what's good anymore, Mason. It's about what's left." That got my attention. Apparently, he'd taken a loan against his house, the house my mum died in, the house we built together when I was 19, pouring the concrete side by side. If he defaulted, he'd lose everything, and he was too proud to tell anyone but the bank. I spent that night staring at the ceiling. My wife, Dina, slept soundly beside me, oblivious to the war still going in my head. Was this karma? Was it my fault? Could I have just hired Mason for some symbolic desk job, kept the peace and moved on? Or was this the price of doing things my way? The next morning, I drove past my office and went straight to the old Galen site, a half-renovated VFW hall with exposed studs and an empty dumpster out front. He was there, sitting on the back of his pickup, smoking a cigarette he'd probably quit years ago. He looked up but didn't speak, so I did. "This isn't how it had to go." He took a drag, then exhaled slowly. "No, but it's how you chose." I stepped closer. "I can still help." He cut me off with a look, the kind of look you only give to someone you've already erased. "You made your team. Go lead it." He flicked the cigarette onto the dirt, ground it with his boot, and walked away. I didn't call again, not when the first lien notice went public, not when the county revoked his bonding license, not even when I found out he'd sold his boat. But a week ago, a manila envelope showed up at my office. No return address, no note, just a single torn resume inside, Mason's, and a red rejected stamp across the top in marker. The new project broke ground the same morning his house went on the market. I only found out because I overheard one of our admin assistants, Kendra, telling someone on the phone, "Yeah, the Galen place. Full ranch with a detached garage. Crazy, right?" She didn't know I was walking by, didn't know that house meant Sunday barbecues, prom photos in front of the azaleas, and the sound of my mum's laughter when she used to sing along to the kitchen radio. I kept walking, didn't say a word. Because what was I supposed to do? Buy it? Move in? Pretend I could fix something just by writing a check? I'd already made my call, and so had he. The project was a logistics warehouse south of town, sterile, brutalist, all metal frames and polished concrete. Nothing like the kinds of builds he used to do. No soul, no artistry. But it was profitable, reliable. We were stacked with reliable now. I walked the site with our lead foreman, Cam, who glanced at me sideways when I didn't say much. "You good, Mason?" I nodded. "Just running through numbers in my head," he shrugged. "Well, numbers are solid. Foundations curing on time, and the steel's ahead of schedule for once. That should have made me feel better. A younger version of me would have taken pride in that." Instead, I stood in the corner of the site office trailer, staring at a weathered whiteboard. Someone had drawn a crude cartoon in the corner. A little stick figure holding a nail gun like a bazooka. It reminded me of the doodles my dad used to draw on scrap plywood when I was a kid. I erased it with my thumb and said nothing. 3 days later, Laura called again. She didn't open with hello, just said, "You need to see him." "Laura?" "No, listen." Her voice cracked. "He had a fall. Last week. Didn't tell anyone. He's walking like hell and barely eating. He coughed up blood yesterday and said it was just bad brisket." That was such a dad thing to say. It hurt. "He won't go to the hospital," she continued, "and he won't see me. But he still checks the mail every day, thinking maybe one of your trucks will roll up like it's all been a dream." I closed my eyes, pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "How bad is it, really?" She was quiet for a beat. "Bad enough I'm calling you." I didn't go that night. I didn't go the next morning either. I spent a full weekend ghosting my own conscience, did laundry, scrubbed the grill, reorganized the damn garage. Dina didn't ask what was wrong. She never pushed when I got like this, just moved around me like water. But Sunday night, I found the shoebox. I was looking for old drill bits in the hall closet and found it wedged behind an unused air filter. The lid was soft, edges taped from years of wear. Inside, a stack of job site photos. Me at age 15, hauling 2x4s twice my size. Me in a hard hat, grinning crookedly next to my dad. Us standing in front of our first joint project, the downtown vet clinic with the crooked awning. Underneath that was a single receipt, April 12, 2002, Home Depot, $189.43. In the memo line, scribbled in pencil, Mason's first tool belt. I drove over Monday morning before the sun came up. Didn't bring anything, no apology, no peace offering, just showed up in boots and an old hoodie. The house looked smaller than I remembered, less mythic. The siding was faded, and the porch steps creaked when I stepped on them. No truck in the driveway, just a busted mailbox with the red flag up, like it was still waiting. I knocked, waited. The curtain shifted slightly, then fell back. When the door opened, he looked like someone else had crawled into his skin. Thinner, eyes sunken, beard patchy and grey. "You look like shit," I said, half laughing. He grunted, "Takes one to know one." And just like that, the door swung open wider. The house smelled like old coffee grounds and sawdust. He shuffled back toward the kitchen, one foot dragging slightly. I noticed the bruises on his arms, the old towel stuffed under the back door to keep the draft out. "You here to say I told you so?" he asked, settling into the same vinyl chair he'd had since before I moved out. "No," I said. "I'm here because Laura said you're being an idiot." That got the smallest smirk. A flicker, really. "She always was dramatic," he said. "You spit blood." He waved it off. I swallowed a screw by accident. "Jesus, Dad. Calm down." Was just a small one. We didn't talk about the business for a while. He asked how Dina was. I told him she'd picked up gardening. He asked if I still hated onions. I lied and said no, even though I'd scraped them off a burger just 2 days ago. Then the silence grew longer. He looked down at his hands, twisted them together. "You think I'm a failure now?" I leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. "I think you're a stubborn old man who bet on loyalty and forgot that sometimes it backfires." He nodded. I wanted to believe Mason just needed a shot. I see now that what he needed was time. And maybe a few pay stubs he earned. Maybe. He cleared his throat, winced. I looked away so he could keep his dignity. When I finally brought up the house listing, he shook his head. "I won't let the bank take it." "You don't have to. I'm not taking your money." I wasn't offering cash. I was offering a plan. He eyed me suspiciously. I laid it out, a merger, roll his assets and remaining accounts into a legacy division under my umbrella. No direct control, but name intact. I'd cover his debts as part of the deal. He'd retain a ceremonial title, Founder Emeritus. No decisions, no signatures, but pride intact. "And Mason?" he asked. "If he wants in, he interviews." "Same as anyone, but I'll take a personal stake in mentoring him." My dad didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at the peeling laminate on the kitchen table, then finally pushed himself up with a grunt. "Show me the paperwork." I left the house just after 9. The morning light was brighter than I expected. I blinked against it and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for a decade. When I got in the truck, I saw 2 missed calls from Cam. I called him back on speaker. "Hey, boss," he said. "Not to bug you, but you might want to come down to Site B." "Why?" "Well, someone claiming to be your nephew just showed up in steel toes and asked where he could find the rebar inventory." My stomach sank. Then I smiled. Did he look like he knew what rebar was? Didn't flinch when I asked. Already hauling bags. I paused. Keep an eye on him, but let him work. You got it. Later that night, Laura texted me one line. "He told me what you offered. He hasn't smiled like that in months." And that's when I realized I hadn't either. The merger paperwork sat on my desk for 4 days before I sent it. Not because I was unsure. Everything checked out legally, financially, structurally. We'd done the math, the numbers balanced. But part of me needed that time, to sit with it, to understand what it meant to carry a name that wasn't just mine, not anymore. Galen Legacy Division wasn't a brand we workshopped. It wasn't focus grouped or tested on a mock-up site banner. It was just what it was. A compromise, yeah, but also a tether back to the years that built me. When I finally sent the signed documents, I half expected him to send them back. No note, no signature, just a silent refusal, like always. But he signed, fast. Laura told me he handed the envelope over to a notary like it was nothing, like handing over a grocery list. I wondered if that was what surrender looked like in his world. Not defeat, but delegation. I scanned the documents again that night just to be sure, and there it was, in clean pen on the final page. Approved, Richard A. Galen, founder 1983 to 2023. I stared at that line longer than I should have. The next morning, Mason showed up again, but this time he was early and wearing gloves. I found him near the scaffolding talking to one of our older electricians, Barry. They were mid-argument about conduit spacing, and Mason didn't back down. Not rude, not cocky, just engaged. Listening, thinking. "Kid's got good instincts," Barry said to me later. "Still green as hell, but he's not dumb." That was the highest praise you could get from Barry. The man once called a journeyman acceptable and meant it as a compliment. I watched Mason walk the site with a clipboard and a slight limp. He'd tweaked his ankle-hauling steel, but he didn't leave early, didn't complain. Later, I caught him scrubbing down a job trailer solo, sleeves rolled up, dust in his hair. "Not too proud to mop," Cam muttered, watching him. Neither was I once. 3 weeks later, Dad showed up on site unannounced. I almost didn't recognize him. He'd shaved. Still looked tired, still moved slower, but something about the way he stood, it felt steadier. He didn't ask for a tour, didn't ask for a badge or a chair. Just walked the perimeter slowly, hands in his jacket pockets, like he was measuring ghosts. Eventually, he found Mason. They talked for maybe 5 minutes, no yelling, no finger wagging. I saw Mason nod once, then again. At the end, Dad clapped a hand on his shoulder and walked away. He didn't come looking for me, didn't need to. That was his way of saying thanks. The real surprise came 2 months later. We were wrapping a corporate expansion out by the county line when I got a certified envelope in the mail. Not a big deal, we get contracts and permits delivered that way all the time. But this one had no company letterhead, just my name. Inside was a handwritten note and a folded document. "Mason told me you've got him doing material takeoffs. He's not great at math, but he's learning. I still don't agree with how you run things. But I see why people follow you. I'm leaving you something. You'll know what to do with it." The document was a deed to a 5-acre parcel just outside of town, a lot I didn't even know he still owned. Zoned commercial, good access road, utilities already stubbed. At the bottom of the deed was a sticky note, "Build something worth it." We did. It took a year. Mason helped design it. Nothing fancy, just a clean, smart build. Polished concrete, open rafters, shaded patio. Inside, shared workspace, tool library, a community classroom. We called it the Yard. Dad didn't want his name on the sign, said it would scare off the freelancers. But we hung his first framing hammer behind glass in the lobby. On opening day, he showed up in a Galen construction jacket from '97. Said it didn't fit like it used to, but he still wore it the whole day. A reporter from the local paper asked him what it felt like to watch his son carry on the family name in a new direction. He shrugged. "Feels like the damn truck finally got out of the ditch," he said. "Did you pull it out yourself?" she asked, smiling. He looked over at me, then at Mason, then back at her. "Nah, took all of us. We never made some big speech, never stood in the rain hugging it out. But we found a rhythm again. He'd send me handwritten notes on scrapwood. Mason would call him with questions about framing codes. And I'd swing by the house some mornings just to steal his coffee and get told how I was still too soft on deadlines. The business stabilized, then grew. We rebranded our legacy crew as Galen Heritage. People loved it. Clients felt like they were getting roots and innovation in one billable hour. But what mattered more? He came to dinner again. He asked about my kids. He laughed at bad jokes. He stopped checking the mailbox alone.